Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the regular council meeting of the Township of Monaghan Council. We are going to commence the meeting at 1 p.m. today. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin the meeting with our land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Monaghan is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to First Nations for their care for and teachings about these lands. May we honor these teachings. Before we begin, I should note that Deputy Mayor Huntley is participating remotely, so we're going to have all recorded votes for the meeting today. Thank you for joining us, Deputy Mayor Huntley. Good to see you there. We see you on the screen. We'll look for an approval of the agenda today. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Natchoff, all in favor. We're going to do a recorded vote for that. I'll go to the clerk.
Through you, Mayor, all votes will be recorded today. Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Natchoff.
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton.
Yes.
And Councillor Byrne.
Yes. That is approved. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Seeing none, we have no closed session. We'll begin the presentations. Chris Callowek from Community Development Program Manager from Peterborough County Hubs Program. Thank you for joining us. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Graham. Appreciate it. And members of council for the opportunity to come and give a presentation on the community or the Peterborough County Hubs Program, which we just officially launched actually this morning in Havelock. Next slide, please. I don't think it's any secret to any rural municipality or anybody who lives in rural communities who needed service, the purpose of a hub or delivering services locally in rural communities. I've listed a number here around what hubs can do around improving access to service, providing service delivery options for agencies, eliminating or reducing client transportation costs, removing technology barriers, providing services in home communities versus making them go to a city or go into Peterborough to access service, increased likelihood for folks to actually receive service versus missing meetings or missing appointments with, say, a case manager or a service agency, and connecting agencies to rural communities. Next slide, please. This program, the Peterborough County Hubs program, is really a bit of an evolution of things that have been going on for a number of years. Actually, before my 2011 mention here, it was back, I think, 2004 or 5, for my time with the city, that we opened 2 hubs, one in Havelock and one in Buckhorn. It had staff, and it was more of a drop-in for anybody to come in with any human or social service kind of question or wanting to use computers to work on resumes or do housing searches. Over time, and it was in around 2011 that we started to put social services case managers out in the county, starting with North Kawartha and Trents Lakes. And up until the pandemic, we had case managers serving all rural municipalities. We had a case manager here in the Old Millbrook School 3 days a week, and Keene for a day a week, Norwood 4 days, and so forth across the county. In some of those locations, we had drop-in services, but when the pandemic came, obviously all those services got withdrawn, and all our staff were at home. And it was during the pandemic that social services were going through some restructuring. We started working on our community safety and well-being plan and planning for what type of outreach we were going to do, because the way we were structured before in social services, we actually had a team of county outreach workers, and we restructured so that any of our case managers could have a rural resident as on their caseload. Similarly, they could have someone who's homeless, someone with addiction, someone with mental health issues, someone with family or children or youth. We used to have those specialized, and it really wasn't working out, which precipitated some of that restructuring. along with some changes at the province with how funding was allocated. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, during the pandemic, we worked on our community safety and well-being plan. Next slide, please. Thanks. And I just highlight this, the plan that was adopted by the city and the county. One of the goals and the strategies that are in that plan. Next slide, please. And the plan that Kevin Monaghan adopted also mentions hubs in 2 of the goals in your plan. Next slide, please. So the way the system works for these hubs is we have an online calendar system. We set it up through the city's network. Chris Allison has access to this system through a login process. Logs in actually became quite cumbersome because you're logging into the city's network, and our IT folks like to really lock that down. So there's a number of procedures to get in, but there's a calendar, and I'll use Millbrook as the example. There's a calendar that agencies can use that Chris would give them when they register. We had a soft launch, however, back in December with 3 locations, one in Havelock, one in Apsley, and one in Lakefield to get the program started. Work out some of the kinks as we brought on more locations, including Millbrook. So I mentioned we had our launch this morning in Havelock, and even before we've launched, we have 12 agencies who have registered for the program and have been using the various locations across the county. Next slide, please. These are where the locations, the 9 locations that we have across the county in Apsley, Duro, Havelock, Keene, Lakefield. We have Millbrook. We have 2 in Norwood and in Warsaw. You might notice that Buckhorn is absent from here. I am working on a location in Buckhorn. There are a number of spots. One of the challenges is that we need private meeting space. Prior to the pandemic, when our social services staff went out, which is very similar to the old Millbrook School, we have keys for a number of libraries. So when they're closed, we could go in, meet with clients, and deliver service. Just struggling in Buckhorn to find private space that we can access on a regular basis, but I'm confident we'll have that and we'll have the whole county covered. Next slide, please. So just as a bit of a demonstration of the program, if you could go to the main web page, that'd be great, the first link. So on our website, this is the public facing portion. What agencies, yep, yes, this one. So if you just scroll up to the top just briefly. So this is the landing page for the County Hubs program. A little bit of information, there's a registration form, and there's a user manual for local agencies. Each of the locations, so if you scroll down, please, and just to the Millbrook, you'll see we have some images of the old Millbrook School, how to get in. We've used the hours of the library as the access times for any agency, any of those 12 agencies, and I'm sure there will be more that end up registering. They basically cut through the library to get upstairs to the 2nd floor. Chris just recently installed that door lock, so we weren't handing out keys to 12, 15 agencies. So when someone registers, Chris would be giving that access code to that door so that they could go in and meet with clients. If you go to the other slide, please, or the other website. So this is what the calendar looks like. When someone registers, Chris would send them a link to this calendar. Each of the locations has a separate calendar. It's not a public site because we want Chris to know, or Kevin Monaghan to know, that CMHA or Forecast or KinArc or social services, who is registered to come in and use your facility. So someone could come to this site and literally book tomorrow at 1 o'clock to use the old Millbrook School location. Chris and Melissa as well would get an email notification of that, so they'd be aware of when their space is being used. They wouldn't have to go and monitor them or anything. The agency would go through, they would meet the client, and they would meet upstairs. When they're done, they would leave, and the service would be provided. So this program has been building up through the pandemic. We were originally looking to just bring it back to our social services staff, but as the planning for the community safety and well-being plan, and it didn't make sense just to limit it to our city staff, is why we started looking for locations and ways to make it accessible to any agency to deliver their services locally. And that's the end of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you for the presentation, Chris. Members of council, any questions for Chris with regards to the presentation today? Deputy Mayor Huntley, any questions? Don't want to exclude you from your remoteness. Very good. Well, thanks very much, Chris. We did see the Community Hub office when we were doing our record tour of a few facilities. So hopefully we see it used as much as possible. And thanks for the efforts to bring the services to the community. I'm sure it's appreciated. Thank you. Very good. Moving on, we have another presentation today that I'm going to turn over to Wayne Hancock to make a brief introduction of the individuals presenting before us today. Wayne? Oh, sorry. We need a motion to receive the presentation from Chris Kellogg today. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Natchoff. Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton.
Thank you for that. That is approved. Mr. Hancock, back to you. Apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, we have before you today a presentation on the master servicing study that has been ongoing for a period of time, probably in excess of 2 years. It was piggybacked on our growth management strategy, which was approved by the previous council late August of 2022. And John Conley will speak to that through part of the presentation on the details of the GMS. We have with us today Rika Law, who is our team leader with RV Anderson, and Matthew Grekula, who is also a project engineer with RVA, and they will present the findings of the master servicing study. Just for council, in particular with council that we have not seen any of this information. This is a great deal of information. It is a planned infrastructure for the future growth of this community through to 2051. So we're looking at just over 28 years in growth for our community. It takes into account what was previously determined by the study by C.N. Watson. And it is still leaves a lot of items to be addressed through the report. It talks about our water, wastewater, and where we have to go to accommodate the growth that already has status with council. And it also talks about the next steps in our process. So, and I wanted to mention to council, if after seeing this information session today, if there are any further questions by council at any point during our process, because there is a lot of environmental assessment process, there's a public meeting to be held and other steps. And I don't council staff are always available along with RVA to answer those questions. So let's, we'll see where we are today. Just as a note, there was a previous report in October of 2021 that took us to a growth period of 2041, and it outlined some strategies and what we required for infrastructure at that point. That report and that presentation is attached to our report in the agenda, first item on the agenda. And I wanted to note that the growth that is planned is intended to be paid for by development charges, has to be financed through that. And it is important that it will form part of our budget considerations going forward on each piece of this puzzle. So there is a financial, certainly a major financial outlay that has to happen. It has to be We have to have the funds available to do this. We have to accommodate the development that has been approved, certainly through MZOs and through by council. But I just want to have council aware that this is only for information, and there will be ongoing reports as we go through the next steps to get to the point of finalizing our public meeting and our EA. So with that, I'd like to invite Rika and Matthew, and we have them available, do we? So if we could start with them, and then we will lead into John Conley.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Greetings to the mayor, council, as well as staff at the township. Presenting from RV Anderson is myself, the project coordinator for the master servicing study, as well as Rika Law, the project manager for the master servicing study. There will also be an update provided regarding the growth management strategy from John Connolly, the executive director of planning and development from the township. With that, I will kindly ask to go to the next slide. So to present the outline of this presentation, we will first be going into a background and context, and then speak regarding existing conditions and capacities of facilities, servicing of short-term growth, servicing of long-term growth, which considers to the year 2051, next steps and questions and comments. We'll kindly ask that questions are refrained until the end of the presentation, and we can discuss that at the questions and comments slide. Next slide, please. Provided for reference are acronyms. During the presentation, we will verbally use the full name for items. However, this is provided for reference and further referring back to. Next slide. Regarding background and context, I will invite John to discuss this aspect of the presentation. Next slide, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Matthew. Through your worship, through council. As background, this is a growth management strategy. So Watson Associates did the original growth management strategy, which included growth to the year 2041, and that was approved by council in May of 2020. In that time, when the growth management strategy was presented to council, the actual provincial growth plan was adopted through amendment number 1, which meant that we actually added another 10 years to the time frame. So with that, Watson Associates came back and updated the GMS to the year 2051, which was approved by council in August of 22 of last year. There were some refinements made in the study based on that discussion, but that's what we have before as council adopted in last August. So that was also developed, the growth management strategy, and part of the reason why it took so much time was done in coordination with the Peterborough County Municipal Comprehensive Review process, their OP review through Hemson and their consultant. So the county official plan, county council approved in June of 22, and is still before the province for approval. Next slide, please. The findings for the growth management strategies overall for the Peterborough County growth management results for 2021 to 2051, that 30-year horizon, across the county, an additional 18,200 people and an additional 10,400 jobs. The annual growth rate for population and jobs are given there. Specifically for the township of Cavan Monaghan, you see an increase over the next 30 years of a population of 7,300. I've given the breakdown by 5-year increments in the table in front of you. On top of that, as a summary, that means Cavan Monaghan will receive roughly 40% of the population as well as 40% of the jobs in the county over that 30-year time horizon. Next slide. What that means is a shift in the traditional low density, which is going from 68% to 48% of low density residential, and from medium and high density, which is about 32% now, to about 52% in housing over those next 30 years. In terms of a breakdown of employment, again, an additional 4,200 jobs are expected in 5-year increments, and the differences are given there. As a result of this work, the work done by Watson in coordination with the county, is that by 2051, through the County Municipal Comprehensive Review, we identified a shortage of land needed to meet this growth. And that's 74.7 hectares of residential, 34.1 hectares of employment land, and 6 hectares of commercial land. Next slide, please. So the land needed to meet the growth is addressed by 2 areas in the growth plan. They define community areas and employment areas. The definitions are there. the idea that urban employment areas are mostly employment, but they can also be in the built-up area as well as the greenfield area. In the community areas, it's mostly population, but you can have some jobs in the commercial area, which can be both, and that's in both the built-up area as well as the greenfield area. So the current Millbrook settlement area, as of today, does not have enough built-up area and designated greenfield to meet the future need. So what happened through the work of the GMS was to identify what the expansion of that settlement area would be like, and also rationalizing some of the land use structure. In other words, we have some urban employment now, but it's also taking a look at the growth for the next 30 years and looking at where that urban employment should be in the future, as well as what happens with the current lands that are right now designated as urban employment. So through the GMS, they reviewed location options that included development phasing, municipal servicing, connectivity, compatibility, contiguity, contiguous land types across and zoning. So as a result, the current urban employment converted to community uses, and the next map and the next slide will show you. So the new urban employment land identified outside the current Millbrook settlement area are towards Highway 115, along County Road 10 and north of Larmer. Next slide, please. And this shows the difference of the old or the current Millbrook settlement area and the urban structure on the left, and then through, and it's a very busy map on the right, but that's what the change in the configuration for growth and changes to the year 2051. Next slide, please. So the results of that work, so this is the addendum work built on the work done in 2020, is that community commercial uses will designate 74.7 hectares of community area within Millbrook, including an additional 6 hectares that map showed before. Will protect designated commercial land supply for the future. Urban employment will be to designate an additional 34.1 or 84 acres in the future. And then on top of that, there's an establishment of an intensification target, said 15%, but really it's specific to the 215 units that was discussed and negotiated between the county and municipality with respect to the built-up area to the year 2051. The township's official plan review will formalize the new settlement area. And then on top of that, we're talking about putting tools in place that will monitor actual growth against forecasted in order to track that growth. And because we'll be, once we do the official plan, that's in place for 10 years, we'll also be looking at how do we monitor how things are being built up either in the built up area or in other areas in order to make sure we're working towards those targets. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that tells development right now. So this is approvals and applications in process. It's been color delineated to show what's already approved. And that's Tower Hill North, 700 units, 718 units, in Nina Court, which is Coldbrook Drive, 31 units. What's currently now in applications in process, backed up by minister zoning orders that were approved in 2022, is Vargas, which is in the southeast corner of County Road 10 and Fallis Line East. That's 266 units with commercial. CSU, which is proposed to be 611 units with commercial. That's on the south side of Fallis Line West, across from Tower Hill North. Total number of units draft approved currently, 749. Within submissions, 877, for a total of 626 units here. Now, again, this is just growth that's forecasted for the Millbrook settlement area. It does not include any of the minister's zoning order or additional growth in Kawartha Downs, Fraserville area. So on top of this, Vargas and CSU, the MZO included a commercial component, and that draft concept plan is being developed. Tower Hill South commercial is already zoned commercial, but has a holding provision on that all as well. And on top of that, we have some incremental infilling. We've actually seen an uptick in growth since plan. So Bill 23 with what they call gensel density, with the people looking for second and third units within the current settlement area of Millbrook, but a lot of it's in the downtown as well. Next slide. With that, I'll hand that over to Matthew and Mika.
Thank you, John. I will continue along and speak regarding existing conditions and capacities of facilities. Next slide, please. Existing facilities within the Millbrook area are summarized in the satellite photograph. So to kind of go through each item, in the southwest corner, we have the water treatment plant along King Street. Up north near Fallis Line is the booster pumping station, as well as water storage tank, which are on the same site. On the east side, we have the existing wastewater treatment plant, as well as the Tupper Street sewage pumping station. Next slide, please. The Millbrook existing population provided by Watson and Associates Economists Limited through the growth management strategy includes 2,558 people within 880 residential units, and this was noted at the year 2021. On our end, we've evaluated existing servicing requirements and usage. Existing servicing usage is as follows. So the wastewater treatment plant is currently operating at 50% of its constraining peak capacity of 8,242 meters cubed per day. Shown within the top right-hand side of the slide is the existing servicing as well as remaining capacity, showing that 50% usage. Regarding the water treatment plant, WTP, that is currently operating at 35% of its 3,000 meters cubed per day rated capacity. And the water storage tank is currently operating at 56% of its 2,115 meter cube storage volume. Graphs are provided in the bottom right corner showing existing servicing as well as remaining capacity for these facilities. Next slide, please. Regarding short-term growth, we'll get into this in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Short-term servicing requirements for the approved and applications in process, which were summarized by John earlier, are per the below. As John noted, the approved developments are the Tower Hill North development, Tower Hill South Commercial, Nina Court / Colebrook Drive. In submission, there's currently Vargas, residential and commercial, CSU, residential and commercial, as well as built up area intensification. That's generally within the south section of the satellite view shown on the right-hand side of the slide. Noted is each of these developments. So Tower, start in the bottom left-hand corner of the satellite view. The CSU development is shown there on the south side of Fallis Line. Tower Hill North is shown on the north side of Fallis Line. There is the Tower Hill South commercial piece, which is at the intersection of Fallis Line and Tupper Street. The Vargas development is on the east side of Tupper Street, and Nina Court is east of Tupper Street as well. Next slide, please. Given the approved and submitted developments from the previous slides, as was annotated, servicing usage is as follows. The wastewater treatment plant with these developments connected to the system would be operating at 106% of its 8,242 meters cubed per day rated capacity. The water treatment plant would be operating at 115% of its 3,000 meters cubed per day rated capacity. And the water storage tank would be operating at 153% of its 2,115 meters cubed stored volume. Therefore, as the servicing usage is greater than 100% and above the capacity of existing facilities, necessary upgrades would be required to service these short-term developments. They're generally summarized below, and this would include upgrades to the Tupper Street sewage pumping station, upgrades to the booster pumping station, expansion of the water treatment plant, expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, a new water storage tank to provide additional volume, and also is groundwater exploration, new wells, water treatment plant, and high pressure transmission made to feed the new water storage tank. We've noted that a possible location for a new groundwater source is the Sire Line property wells. Next slide, please. Here is kind of the breakdown of the timeline of these items. So developments that may be serviced with initial system upgrades. And by initial system upgrades, this would generally be simple in nature, such as upsizing of pumps within an existing station, linear service extension, that sort of thing. And there are developments that may be serviced via these initial system upgrades. We've generally noted that this includes upgrades to the Tupper Street sewage pumping station, booster pumping station upgrades, water main sewer extensions, etc. These developments are for Tower Hill North, Tower Hill South Commercial, Nina Court, Colbert Drive, Vargas, and Piltup area intensification. Additional system upgrades would be more complex in nature and generally include expansion of facilities. This is going to lead into long-term servicing requirements, and those would be for CSU, which is residential and commercial, future residential, beyond, future community area commercial, and future employment. With that, I'll ask to go to the next slide. Leading into long-term growth to the year 2051. Next slide, please. Per the growth management strategy final addendum report, figure 3-5, which was demonstrated by John earlier, and the conversion of parcels, I will say, we've presented here land use legends on a satellite view. Noted in orange is residential pieces, and noted in blue is employment pieces. We've also identified intensification within the built-up area on the south side of Millbrook. And with that, I'll ask you to go to the next slide. So servicing of long-term growth to the year 2051 will include the following. Per the earlier slide, the 2021 population is 2,558 persons. We're expecting a population growth of 7,897 people, leading to a total 2051 population of 10,455 persons. Residential units, currently the 2021 number of units is 880. The amount of growth is 2,458 units, leading to a total number of units of 3,338 units. On an employee standpoint, there is an expected employee growth of 3,013 employees. Demonstrated on the right-hand side is the existing residential persons of 2,558 people, and the long-term 2051 number of residential persons. Also noted is the existing residential units of 880 and the long-term amount of 4,129. With that, I'll ask to go to the next slide. Noted in the table below is the 2051 demands versus the existing facility capacity. So the wastewater peak flow, the expected demand is 13,316 meters cubed per day. The existing facility is rated for a peak capacity of 8,242 meters cubed per day. On a water max day demand standpoint, the 2051 demand is 6,214 meters cubed per day, and the existing capacity is 3,000 meters cubed per day. Water storage requirements, the 2051 demand is 4,912 meters cubed, and the existing capacity is 2,115 meters cubed. And therefore, the 2051 demands are above the capacities of existing facilities. With that, I will ask to go to the next slide. And I will hand this over to Rika Law for discussion regarding the projections.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt. So I know these graphs may look a little daunting, so we'll be walking through these with you. So for the next 3 slides, they basically are graphs that show when the projected flows will be up to the facility's rated capacities, in which case you would then need to expand. So for this first slide here is in regard to the wastewater treatment plant. So what we have is the solid black line at 8,000, a little bit above 8,000 cubic meters a day is the rated capacity of the existing wastewater treatment plant. And what we have is the orange line that is showing the projected peak flows based off of the bar charts that you see, the gray bar charts as well as the blue bar charts. So these are in regard to the residential units that will be coming online as development progresses. The blue bar charts are showing the new residential units per year, and then the gray ones show the cumulative units as they go along. And so with the accumulated units, we use that to convert into flows, which then gives you the orange line, where it crosses the black line. So for example, in this graph, we are expecting that it might cross somewhere in the timeframe of 2032. That is definitely when the existing treatment plant will no longer be able to assist with treating all the sewage that is needed and a new plant is required. Please do keep in mind that these projections are based off when developments are connected rather than when the township actually needs to give approval for these applications. So what we want to do is to have these facilities upgraded or expanded in advance of these two lines crossing. And so that's where in the red arrow, the double arrow, you see below, that is the time frame that is needed in order for a facility of the size to be expanded. So for example, having needing to do investigations as well as class environmental assessment, design and construction could take somewhere in the order of 6 years to do. So if we were to start that this year, let's say, that would be done in 2029, and that would still give a bit of buffer between when the facilities would be constructed and ready to go to when development is expected to reach the capacity of the existing facility. So the idea is if we can plan ahead, then the township would be well positioned to allow for these new developments to come and not become a bottleneck as a result of the facilities. Again, this is an approximate timeline, and the development timeframe may shift, and so we want to give the township as much buffer as possible and to plan ahead. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is in regard to, it looks very similar, but this is in regard to your water facility. So the wells as well as the water treatment plant. You can see that the existing wells are at a 3,000 cubic meters per day capacity. And the threshold of when the forecasted population is to meet that existing capacity would be somewhere around the year of 2031. Again, that could move a bit depending on when developments do come online. And in regards to getting additional wells and the new treatment plant up and running, that could be in the order of around 5 years. Again, needing to do the field investigations, finding the wells, testing them out, doing the class environmental assessments, the design, and the construction. And so again, the idea is that that red star is well ahead of the time frame of when the capacity might be exceeded with the existing treatment system. And so that's the idea, to stay ahead of that time frame. Next slide, please. For this last slide, it is in regard to the water storage. And you may see that the orange line looks a little different than the previous two graphs. And that is because with the recommendations from the Ministry of Environment, they have a different way of calculating what the storage requirement is. It is not necessarily as linear as some of the other treatment plants. It's a sort of a step kind of approach where if you hit a certain population target, you then need to go to the next bracket of providing additional storage for fire. And so that's why there is a steeper jump at a certain population trigger. But regardless, the idea is still the same, where the orange line crosses the thick black line, which is just slightly above 2,000 cubic meters a day. That is when a new water tower is going to be required in order to provide for the storage of the new developments. And so again, the idea is if the township were to start planning for a new tower, let's say sometime this year, it would take in the order of 3 to 4 years to get the investigations, the design, and the construction done, and then have that built and ready to go in advance of the orange line crossing the black line. So again, that is the intention, is if the township can get these facilities going ahead of the required timeframe, that would allow the township to avoid being the bottleneck for such developments to come through. So I'll pass the rest of the presentation over to Matt.
Thank you. So servicing of long-term growth is annotated per the satellite view image provided within the slide. And again, this is based on the map that was included in the GMS final addendum report, figure 3-5. Noted regarding expansions and new facilities. We've again noted land use legend. Orange is residential, blue is employment. So to start off in the bottom left-hand corner and work our way through the satellite view, there would be upgrades to the existing wells and water treatment plant expected. Additionally, there would be a new water storage tank, and the location of that is to be determined. We've generally outlined view shown in the white bubble. Booster pumping station upgrades are expected. The existing water storage tank is also noted, which would stay in service. New sewage pumping station is considered to service the northern orange residential section, as well as the blue employment section on the north approaching the highway. We've also noted a possible location for new wells and water treatment plant, which is on Sire Line. And there is possible routing for a high pressure transmission main that would be from the new wells and water treatment plant to the new water storage tank. Again, the location of the water storage tank is to be determined. The existing wastewater treatment plant on the east side is considered for expansion. Upgrades to the sewage pumping station are expected. And generally, linear infrastructure upgrades throughout the settlement area would also occur. With that, I will ask to go to the next slide. On a long-term facility basis, required upgrades are noted in this slide. So again, to kind of repeat what was presented in the previous slide regarding the figure, we're expecting a wastewater treatment plant expansion, a new sewage pumping station for the northern employment and residential land, upgrades to the Tupper Street sewage pumping station, trunk sewer extensions and upgrades. This again is to be determined and depends on the servicing requirements and developments. Regarding water, there is going to be groundwater exploration, new wells, a new water treatment plant, a new high pressure transmission main. The wells at the Sire Line property are a possible location for a new groundwater source. There would be construction of a new water storage tank. The location is to be determined. There would be upgrades to the existing water treatment plant, upgrades to the existing booster pumping station, and water main extensions and upgrades, which are generally to be determined. Next slide, please. Next steps. Next slide, please. So there is next steps for the master servicing study, and this includes a water and wastewater master servicing study public information center. Afterwards, there would be a draft water and wastewater master servicing study Class EA report. After the draft, there would be a final water and wastewater master servicing study Class EA report and recommendations to council. Regarding what was discussed herein on short-term servicing, next steps are also noted for this aspect. There is going to be a Baxter Creek assimilative capacity study, which is currently in progress. There would be design of Tupper Street sewage pumping station upgrades and a possible Class EA. There would be design of booster pumping station upgrades. Existing wells would require a hydrogeological investigation. The new well site groundwater investigation and Class EA, water storage class environmental assessment, and a wastewater treatment plant expansion class environmental assessment. With that, I will ask to go to the next slide. And the next slide as well, which will be regarding questions and comments.
Thank you, Matt and Rika, for the presentation. Obviously, a lot of information, and this is kind of an update as we continue to move along from the previous council's decision-making into this new council. So questions for members of council with regards to the presentation today? Councilor Byrne?
Through you, Chair. How close are you on the numbers? Because this started a while back, a couple of years ago, but I understand to the actual numbers of new residents we have online today. And the other one I was going to ask about was, nobody's mentioned the capacity of this new water tower, if it has to be built, if the things move the way they're supposed to move according to the documentation, and how it compares to the empty one sitting at the top of the hill going out County Road 21.
Through you, Chair. So I believe the numbers are fairly accurate. On a long-term basis, the long-term numbers to the year 2051 are based on the growth management strategy. Those are not expected to change. On the short-term servicing standpoint, we have utilized the approved and in submission developments that were within this slide deck. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, just in regard, Councillor Burns' comment partially is related to Tower Hill South. Tower Hill South has been accommodated in the study report and full population is taken into account. So those numbers are in as existing residents in this study. The projection, of course, is Tower Hill North and ongoing. Those are the ones that are being, there's pre-grading operation going on that site. In regard to the standpipe, and I can defer to both Matthew and Rika, the existing standpipe is not of the right elevation nor of the right location to provide adequate pressure and fire protection capacity for the growth area that is proposed. So it does require a new standpipe. I believe in our conversations, it is in a position that we will have to take that standpipe down at some point. It is infrastructure that's quite old and should be removed. So I'm not sure that Matthew, you or Rika may want to add to that.
Sure, we can do that. Thank you, Wayne. So, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, the existing water tower is actually full. We are using it in its full capacity. When we say it is only at 50% capacity used, it simply means that the demand right now is not drawing it to its full usage. However, as Wayne was mentioning, or Mr. Hancock, sorry, was mentioning, the new development is at a higher elevation. So to get to them, we need to go through the booster station, or as more and more of the development comes online, there will be a need for additional storage that the booster station itself cannot necessarily provide. And so that's where a new water tower is required. I don't know if that answers your question fully, or did you need to elaborate any further, or you have follow-up questions?
I think we're good. Thank you for that. I see Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And through you, I had a couple of questions. I guess the first one is with the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. I assume you're not taking into account the theoretical limits of what the Baxter Creek capacity actually is for effluent being dumped into it. So because we could run into that problem at some point as well, right?
Through you, Mayor. So on that basis, we are currently proceeding with an assimilative capacity study for Baxter Creek, and that will help to identify that aspect of this.
Okay. A couple more questions, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, just go through it. It's just easier to let you run your course, and then we'll come back to the in-house folks here.
All right, well, thanks. I guess one thing I noted is in the graphs you had of when the equipment gets replaced and when the crossover lines are, you never change the capacity line once the upgrade takes place. So it's hard to tell how much of it we're actually covering when we do an upgrade, and whether another upgrade is coming relatively soon or not, right? Because you left that line the same. It'll be much more beneficial to see in your next presentations kind of what the effect of that upgrade is to that the capacity lines. I guess on top of that, with the water rates and the wastewater rates that we've done with the projections, with the growth that you've been using with the Watson numbers, I'm just curious, has the extent of the development or the expansions that you're suggesting for each of these units, does anybody know whether that's been accounted for in the Watson rates already, or is this going to be a significant change to what Watson's already done on that level?
Through you, Mayor. So the numbers that Watson provided were regarding population and employment and that sort of thing. The actual specific user rates, whether that be water demand rates per person or wastewater demand rates per person, were based on existing data that we have available for facilities. So that did not come from Watson. Watson provided us the expected populations and growth and persons per unit and that information. However, us in association with the township were able to determine user rates in terms of water and wastewater usage.
Through you, Mayor, just to follow up on that one. I mean, the rates that Watson develops, the water and wastewater, is based on, obviously the usage, the number of people, but it's also based on the operating expense and the capital expense of having that, the infrastructure in place. I guess my question is more related to, they had accounted for a little bit of capital expense going along the way, but do we know or do we not know whether the capital expenses of the expansions of everything that you're talking about here are also incorporated in that, or whether we're going to have to redo the wastewater rates once you have an idea of what your expansion costs are?
I think Mr. Hancock has something to say to that effect, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor. First of all, CN Watson they have done a number of studies for us, and I'll start off with the development charge study. The development charge study was completed utilizing the numbers from, for the most part, from our RVA and our servicing study to look at growth and what the development charges should be to accommodate the new infrastructure. The rate study has been based to date on only part of that. It did not take into account the new infrastructure because the majority of the infrastructure is to be paid for by development charges. So I think they're, for the most part, CN Watson has been the company doing both the GMS, they did the wastewater rate study, and they have done the development charges. So we do have continuity in that point. I think the wastewater rate study and wastewater rate study did take in account some of the growth, but these are ongoing reports that are renewed on an ongoing basis. Development charges will be renewed in 5 years from last year, and then the rate study will be reviewed also. So they will take that into account. So I'm certain parts of this is sort of ongoing. So I don't think it's complete on the rate study as Councillor Deputy Mayor Huntley has mentioned.
Oh, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hancock. I did want to know that there was continuity, though. That was one of the key part that I was looking for. So thank you.
And I would assume, just to build on that, Mr. Hancock, that as we mentioned, we're just receiving this for information today, but as alluded to in next steps, there will be decisions and recommendations of council. Some of that will be projects and actual executions of some of the works to be done that can then be factored in the future rate studies, because there's a short lifespan of those that we're constantly redoing them and revisiting them to make sure they're in consistency with the existing capital plans, et cetera. Correct?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We'll report back. We have to report back on all the pieces of the puzzle. And of course, as we look at new infrastructure, that has to be worked back into the rate study. You're quite right. That will be ongoing and consistent. Thank you.
In regards to a couple of questions that I had with regards to the report and the presentation, I'm assuming that the one element we've talked about commercial growth and we've talked about residential growth. In the short-term servicing plan, I'm assuming the institutional growth with regards to the development of a new school on the 5 or 6 acre parcel, excuse me, I'm not sure which is the accurate number at this time. I'm assuming that institution has also been factored into these, capacity issues or planning. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, just we have had conversations. The school proposal is included in Tower Hill North. We have carried numbers for Tower Hill North. We certainly have carried capacities for the existing school that is presently in place. And we are aware that there is a proposal. We haven't got all the details on the future student population, but we are going to, or we will be taking that into account as we update our report.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hancock. The other question I had was with regards to the 15% intensification. Can you quantify that in the actual numbers that we're factoring for that intensification over the short term? I'm assuming it's based on, if I were to extrapolate it based on the 880 units that are existing users, that would be approximately 100 units for that 15%. But just as we're reviewing from a planning standpoint, the intensification, whether they're secondary or tertiary suites, I just wanted to know what that 15% over that horizon is actually expected to be with regards to a number of units.
First of all, Mr. Mayor, I think in regard to intensification, there's a number of factors where Bill 23 has spoken to additional units within our growth area. We've had conversations, of course, senior staff with RVA staff, and we talked about the intensification in Millbrook, both from the issue of higher density growth that might be planned, but also infilling additional units. And we are making an allowance for what they call intensification that we've talked about is in the range of 10 to 12%. We have not got to 15% yet, but we are looking at that as a number that's in question. The reason we say that is we're not really sure where all these little pieces of the puzzle are falling out, and it's particularly related back to the provincial government and the legislation that's coming down with the changes, and it affects development charges, as we're aware of. It affects what we're allowed to charge development charges on. So these are things that we are looking at going forward and will form part of that final report coming forward.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think just in all of most of the high level discussions or presentations, the information, we quantify it within the number of units, except for the intensification. So I think what I was kind of getting at is, well, we have this 15% number, but I'm not sure if that 15% is based on the existing number of units in the village, which would, like we said, approximately 880 at the time. So we're expecting the volume, regardless of whatever shape they may take in regards to what that intensification means. Are we able to quantify that number of, I understand it's not as defined a unit as a single attached dwelling, but I think it would be helpful to understand exactly what we're forecasting from an intensification in the same quantification that we are for the other components of it. Mr. Conley?
If I may, Your Worship, through you to the rest of council, if you recall, in August of last year, we had a very lengthy discussion about the report, the final report, and we talked about the 15% target being aspirational in the sense that it's a target, is something that we want to achieve over the next 30 years, knowing that there are a lot of difficulties within the built-up area of the downtown part of Millbrook being designated there, flood zones. You've got green fields, green lands, you've got heritage structures, stuff like that. At the end, what the report that council had discussed and what Watson had finalized is that we talked about a recommendation that that the council supports 250 units toward the County of Peterborough's overall proposed intensification target of 15% as identified in the county official plan. So again, I think when we take a look at that 215, which is something that you and previous mayor had negotiated significant time, spent a lot of time with the county on, that was about a 6% intensification target in the built up area. And at the time, the discussion on was a recognition that in the Forest Service area, overall, some will overachieve, some will underachieve. Millbrook is one of those, but overall, we'd like to go through and try and go towards that 15%. We may get into 10 and 12%. All that background stuff, material and information is being put into the same work that RV Anderson is doing. So with that, there's consistency, as Deputy Mayor Huntley had talked about before, but on top of that, that was prior to Bill 23. So we see things like that as steps towards adding to some of the intensification, which weren't necessarily thought of at the time when this was adopted in August, but thought that there would be opportunities to be able to do that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, through you, and I appreciate that. And it's kind of an extension of the line of questioning, because we talked in the previous council about all of the constraints and the nuances of the village of Millbrook, whether they're topographical or floodplain, and heritage, like you mentioned, in the per capita number of those buildings. So I guess why I'm trying to quantify what that number is because if we agree that those are unique constraints for that intensification target that we weren't, I mean, it was much higher when we initially had the conversation with the county. We're getting into, what will come to be will be certainly a much lesser number than that original. But I guess what I'm trying to get an understanding on is if we think that the intensification percentage and the number of units therein are not feasible, then that by calculating for that percentage into what we're going to require for short-term servicing, I'm just trying to understand, okay, well, if we're not going to hit that, whatever that number of unit or whatever the 10 to 50% is, that's capacity. I want to know how much of that capacity is in play. And if in fact the short term is not as dire because we know, or realistically, we're not going to achieve the amount of intensification because of all the nuances that we're all aware of, then that capacity, it's not as a dire or an urgent in need necessarily, not to say that there aren't needs and works that need to be done, but it is a factor as to when in the timeline therein in which those needs for that infrastructure are going to be required. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of, okay, well, if we're not going to hit that 15% in the short-term horizon, well, then, I know we want to reserve certain capacities for commercial and employment purposes, but I just want to make sure that we're clearly encapsulating what the expectations or what all of the forecasted numbers and percentages are versus what we think is actually a practical forecast when it comes to making, very significant and expensive decision making. Luckily, DC will be funding the majority of it, but when the timeline of what those projects is going to need to be done, because it's coming up fairly quickly, that's going to be a factor to me that I think I would feel more comfortable understanding exactly what number of units or things like that will be factored in for the short-term growth of that decision. Does that make sense? Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we understand your position about trying to account for that, and we can do that. I think the problem we're having is that when we look forward into the crystal ball, we're not sure where the growth numbers are going to be. We don't know. For example, we'll look at Tower Hill North. We're not sure how many units are going to come on at which point in time. And so each one of these become a little bit more unpredictable, but we can make the allowances and we can refine that as we go along. But I think as far as saying we have this amount allowed for, we can keep it for a period of time, and then we have to relook at it and say that allocation should be used up because it's not being used for what it was kept for. That I think is an ongoing situation. But I think we have your comment, and I think we'll note that accordingly.
Very good. Thank you for that. Other questions, members of council? Councilor Byrne?
Through you, Chair, moving forward from this point, does it still remain a user pay operation for the designated settlement area of Millbrook?
To Mr. Mayor, to Councillor, first of all, water, wastewater is provincially designated as a user pay system. So it will remain a user pay system. It is not a tax dollar system. So just to differentiate, I think we pointed out earlier that the majority of these upgrades will be development charges. That's number one. Number two, as your new users come on stream, they should be paying accordingly to those as they occupy the units and become a user of the system. But it is going to be a water, wastewater user fee system.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne?
Yes, through you, Chair. Now, the decision-making process that's involved in how many units we allow to be built anywhere in the township, that's struggled between, I believe, the provincial government, our level of government, and the developers, as well as the market. So that's it. Where does the pecking order go there?
Through your worship to Councilor Byrne, if you're asking about the number of houses in terms of what's going on, so the growth plan has an appendix. In that appendix, it lays out the number of people and jobs as minimum target, basically minimum achievements. And the province requires that all the upper tier, lower tier municipalities come into conformity with that. The county has done this exercise. We worked with them and they submitted their official plan last June. It is still with the province. The province will approve that based on those overall higher numbers. You can overachieve, but there are minimum targets laid out in the growth plan in the appendix specific to that. Our work fed into the county's official plan, their municipal comprehensive review, so that the growth of the numbers that you saw, the 40% of the people and the jobs to this township were based on a number of different factors. So the pecking order is The province sets the numbers. They are minimum targets. They can be overachieved, but at the very least, they have to be laid out in official plans as to how those are going to be met at the upper tier level. The county has done its work, as did the city of Peterborough. That's with the province, assuming that it will be approved as I expect it should be. Then what will happen is we will have our targets for the municipality. Then what we do is translate that into the actual space. The growth management strategy trying to take the number of people in jobs, it becomes very much a land budgeting exercise to say, what is our existing built up area and designated greenfield area? We're in a bit of an odd situation because we don't have enough land to accommodate all that. So we actually had identified, as I laid out in the slide, 74.7 acres for residential and another 34 plus for employment in order to meet the provincial requirements. Once the county's official plan has been approved, and we assume that'll be done so with very few amendments, we have a year to bring our official plan into conformity with the counties, which would include those numbers of people and jobs. How we translate onto the ground is that when individual developers come forward, we are mindful of how this meets our targets with respect to densities, and also like not only in terms of intensification, but also in terms of densities of 55 people and jobs per hectare in the greenfield areas. With simplifying it, province sets the targets, county, municipality, it all goes in a pecking order. It's all consistent. We look at individual developers, they come forward. And as I mentioned in my slide, we're trying to go from the low densities, which was traditional, to more medium and high, with the idea that we use up less land and how we meet those targets as we go along. Every 10 years will be up for review. So we'll do course correction and report back to council on an ongoing basis as to how we're tracking of what we forecasted to what we're seeing on the ground. I hope that answers.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. Other questions? Seeing none. Deputy Mayor Huntley, just double check. Don't see any hands in the corners there despite the glare. Okay, so we have a motion with regards to the presentation, we're just looking for a motion to receive the presentation for information at this time. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Natchoff, all in favor. We need a recorded vote for the clerk.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff.
Yes.
That is approved. Thank you very much, everyone, for the presentation and the information. We'll look forward to hearing more about this as we move forward. Next item on the agenda, I'm just catching up, excuse me. We have the minutes of the regularly held meeting on March 20th, 2023. Looking to approve those minutes as presented. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Edgerton. We need a recorded vote for this as well, clerk.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham. I apologize, Mayor Graham.
Yes.
First time this term of council. We'll note that, not like Mr. Hancock. And Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes.
That is approved. We now have a few more sets of minutes that we have to do piece by piece, as I'm told by the clerk, so bear with me. The minutes for the Downtown BAA Board of Management meeting of January 12th, 2023 be received for information. Can I have a mover? Councillor Byrne, Councillor Edgerton, Ms. Page,
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
and Mayor Graham.
yes, that is approved. The next set of minutes before us is the minutes of the Cavan Public Library Board meeting. Minutes of November 15th and February 21st are before us, be received for information. Can I have a mover? Councillor Natchoff, seconder, Councillor Edgerton, Ms. Page?
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
and Counselor Byrne.
Yes.
That is approved. The next set of minutes are the committee minutes from the Nova Valley Trails meeting of September 26th and October 20th. That these minutes be approved as presented. And I have a mover, Counselor Byrne, seconder, Counselor Natchoff. Ms. Page?
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
and Counselor Edgerton.
Yes.
That is approved. I believe that's all of the minutes. I'm going to ask that we take just a 3-minute break at this point before we come back and get into the reports. We'll be right back. And she said your name. You got to pause a second for her to. Oh, very good. Thank you for that. We'll reconvene the meeting. We are at the report section of the meeting, report 9.1, Public Works 2023 Water Wastewater Master Servicing Study Report. Mr. Conlon, or Mr. Hancock, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, this is just a report based on the information session that we've just previously had. It is recommendation before you is that the report Public Works 2023-10 be received for information. And the intent of the report was to provide some highlights of the RVA presentation we've just seen, touched on the GMS, which was provided by our staff, Mr. Conley. And also attached to that is the previous presentation we noted, which was from October of 2021, which does provide some information and a bit of financial detailing that's not included in this presentation. In addition to that, we have included a course development charges background study, which points out some of the areas where the DCs have, in particular in water, wastewater, are including accommodation of the new infrastructure that's planned for the future. So this is, for the most part, a repeat of what you've already seen.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. So this is just a summation of a lot of the background work that wasn't included in the presentation for this current council's purview. So we're just receiving this information. Looking for a mover. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Natchoff, Ms. Page.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff.
Yes.
That is approved. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the next report, Public Works 2023-07, tender for the slurry seal. I believe Mr. Hutchison will be presenting this report. Over to you, Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council. Before you, there are two recommendations for the slurry seal tender T-PW-23-05. The first recommendation is that council award the slurry seal tender T-PW-23-05 to Miller Paving Limited at the lowest tender amount of $260,187.84. The total tender amount with net municipal HST is $264,767.15. And the second recommendation is that council approves 9.8% contingency in the amount of $26,000 for this project. The total amount for approval, including contingencies, is $290,767,000. Oh, sorry, $290,767.15. And just to note, in the overview section, we have listed the sections of roads that will be receiving the surface treatment. These are the same sections that, slurry seal for this year. They're the same sections that received surface treatment in 2022. We've been doing this program for a number of years, and we think it produces a really nice driving surface that has been positive throughout the public. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Questions, members of council? Councillor Byrne.
Through you, Chair, when you turn south onto Elder Drive and you cross over the bridge heading on the east side of the road heading south, the part of the ditch that got washed out over the course of the last year has been patched. Is there plans in the work to do some ditch work repair and proper patching before the slurry seal would go on that stretch of road?
To Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne, first of all, yes, there is some improvement to that area. There was a washout probably about a year or more now. We did do some temporary repair, but there will be some restoration done before we do slurry seal in the area. So yes, there will be.
Other questions, members of council? Deputy Mayor Huntley, I don't see your hands. We're all good. Very well. We have a motion then. Oh, sorry. Oh, there it is. Deputy Mayor Huntley, glad I called on. Over to you.
Yeah, well, you prompted a question, so through you, Mayor, to Mr. Hancock or Drew, I guess, do the different companies bring a different slurry seal to the table, or is the product pretty much the same, and the difference in their bids is more, their own applications and their own, labor rates and things like that? I'm just curious whether they have the same product or not.
Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Huntley. First of all, the provincial spec is the same for both, so the specification they meet is the same. The unit price is the difference, so it is the contract price where the difference lies. It is the same product for both companies.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hancock.
Very good. So there are two recommendations before us in the report. The council award the slurry seal tender to Miller Paving Limited at the lowest tendered amount, and that the council approve a 9.8 contingency in the amount of 26,000 with regards to and the other fundings therein. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder for those two recommendations? Councilor Byrne and Councilor Natchoff, all in favor? Ms. Page?
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes.
That is approved. Thank you for that, Drew and Wayne, for those comments. Moving on, we are at 9.3. Oh, I just closed my agenda. There we are. 9.3 report before us, Public Works 2023-09 with the Main Street reconstruction. Before we commence the report and I turn it over to Mr. Hancock, at the request of council, a clarification memo was provided to council to assist with the financial breakdown of this report with regards to the Main Street reconstruction. And I just wanted to make a motion to add it to the website, and we need a motion to do that. I ask Councilor Byrne, Councilor Natchoff, Ms. Page, I'll ask you to take the vote.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
and Mayor Graham.
Yes. Very good. We'll now commence the presentation of the report. Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, the recommendations before you in this report are that council award the Main Street reconstruction tender TPW 23-04 to Bean Construction at the tender amount of $1,366,143.72. The total tender amount with net municipal HST is $1,390,187.85. Recommendation number 2 is that council approve a 10% contingency in the amount of $139,018.79 plus contract administration with Engage Engineering in the amount of $67,497.41. This including net HST for this project. The total amount for approval, including contingencies, is $1,596,704.05, and this is including net municipal HST. And recommendation number 3 is that the Main Street reconstruction program of $1,110,000 was pre-approved finance report 2022-19 in the 2023 capital budget as funded $600,000 water wastewater, which included an ICIP green funding and $510,000 public works under hot mix paving and sidewalks. The additional cost of the $486,704.05 will be funded through the OSEP, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund 2022 formula-based allocation received. That is a recommendation to allow for the over expenditure in this project. The staff, just as additional comments, you'll note in the report that we believe the project is competitively bid. There was a number of bidders on this project. We are finding that prices are coming in quite high. We're not sure that we have full control of those prices. So our estimate on this project was low for budget purposes. We did provide the spreadsheet, which I think at the request of council, which does outlay the cost of the project, the different funding sources of the project, including water, wastewater, and taxation, and includes the ICIP funds as well as the infrastructure, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. So those recommendations are before you for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Questions, members of council, with regards to the report before us? Deputy Mayor Huntley?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, not so much a question, but just a thank you to Ms. Pope and Mr. Hancock for preparing the spreadsheet for the breakdown, and certainly made it a lot more digestible and easy to understand. And I now have no questions for you because I understand it. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Huntley. Other questions, members of council? Seeing none, with regards to the variability between the tenders, with regards to further analysis when you've gone through the vetting process, with regards to this is there was a huge gap or a huge span of variable costs for the project. Was there any sort of identifiable justification or explanation behind that amount of variability, or should we just assume it's based on market conditions and competition and other local factors?
Mr. Mayor, I think we found it's actually the contractors' want for work is driving the cost, and I think that supports the low tenders in this case. The part of the pieces that we're finding is that certain material costs seem to be out of line. They're 4 times what they might have been a year ago, and that happens to be water main unit prices. Labor is a problem for the contractors because they're having problems supporting it with seasonal labor. But I think the numbers themselves are just, some contractors were more hungry for the work, and that's showing in the low tender versus the ones that had some work already lined up. And I think that's the bottom line.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hancock. Seeing no more questions, there are 3 recommendations in the report before us. Looking for a mover and a seconder for those 3 recommendations. Councillor Natchoff, Councillor Byrne, Ms. Page, if you could take the vote.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
and Councillor Byrne.
Yes.
That is approved. Thank you, council. Moving on, we now have Public Works 2023-11 road sweeping services. I believe Mr. Hancock will be taking this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, the recommendation before you is that council award the road sweeping contract for 2023 to Fairview Trucking at the hourly rates quoted to an upset limit of 85,000, including net HST. The reference in this one is a request for quotation as per our bylaw 5.2 and the single source part of the purchasing policy under bylaw 2020-22. We did call for quotations on this work. They are outlined in the report. Again, we found some differences in the unit prices. We will note that Fairview Trucking has completed this contract in the past and has done very decent work for us, and they have come back if we've had any complaints. So I think that's a reference for a local company. We are going this process in order to qualify and quantify the contracts that we have available for this work. So that's just a comment, but we are recommending Fairview for the street sweep.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hancock. Questions, members of council? Councillor Byrne?
Through you, Chair, do we as a township still have the facilities of a tandem truck with a tank with a spray nozzle to do some of that street cleaning with high pressure water that we could suck out of one of the many swamps in the area.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Byrne, we do have a water truck which is to wet down grounds and dust, things of that nature. We do not have a high pressure. We do not have a high pressure washer that we use. The sweeper the company has to provide to what I call wash the streets after they have been swept. So we do not have that available with. So we don't have. We do water truck is used for the watering of gravel roads and whatnot just prior to surface treatment, things of that nature, but not necessarily used in a street sweeping operation. So that's not available at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Other questions, members of council? Seeing none, we have a recommendation before us with regards to the execution of the street sweeping contract. And I look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Natchoff. Ms. Page, if you take the vote.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yeah.
and Councillor Edgerton.
Yes.
That is approved. Nice to see the award going to a local company. Thank you for that, Mr. Hancock. The next report before us is the road occupancy permits for 2023 special events. Ms. Iyer.
Thank you, Mayor. The report before council is PEB 2023-16, road occupancy permits for 2023 special events with the following recommendations. The council authorized staff to work with the county to issue road occupancy permits for special events on county roads in the township for events, festivals in 2023 as outlined in the report, and that the township of Cavan-Monaghan provide a certificate of insurance to the county of Peterborough for the noted 2023 event festivals listed in the report.
Thank you for that, Ms. Iyer. My light wasn't on. Sorry about that. Is there, with regards to the conversation, it's been an ongoing discussion about having to be a pilot project first with the county. Is there an expectation that, or any reason to believe that the pilot project hasn't been successful and that we can, hopefully maybe this year finally resolve to no longer need to have this sort of arduous process with regards to the permit application?
Through you, Mayor, to you and to the rest of council. Actually, yes, I did have a conversation with representatives from the county. They're extremely satisfied with this particular arrangement. We are meeting in April to extend and make it more permanent. They actually had noted that they would like to extend it to the other townships in the county.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Questions, members of council, with regards to the report? Councilor Byrne.
Through you, Chair, how do they handle anything as far as inclement weather? Is there options for that for quick changes?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Burns. It usually depends on who's organizing it, but typically with BIA events, it's rain or shine. It's pretty challenging to just kind of rework an event of that nature to another day. So typically they're rain or shine.
Thank you, Ms. Iyer. Other questions, members of council? Seeing none, we'll look for a mover and a seconder with regards to the recommendations before us. Councillor Edgerton, Councillor Byrne, Ms. Page, if you could take the vote.
Councillor Edgerton,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
and Councillor Natchoff.
Yes.
That is approved. Thank you, members of council. Next report is report CAO report and capital status. Ms. Hurley, anything to report or update council?
There we go. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything to report at this time, but if there's any questions with regards to the report and capital status budget, I'm here to answer those questions, or staff is. I will mention that we do have our primary projects now on the back end of this document as well. So it'll, as we go through the year, we'll update that and keep you posted on where we are in our capital projects.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Any questions or comments, members of council? Seeing none, we'll look for a mover and a seconder for the update with the capital report and capital status from CAO. Councillor Natchoff, Councillor Byrne, all in favor? Ms. Page?
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes.
That is approved. 9.7 is council committee verbal reports. Any members of council with a verbal report for their committee behaviors thus far? Seeing none, we'll move forward. And
Oh.
Deputy Mayor Huntley, you're just slow on the trigger, but we'll wait. Very good. Over to you.
No problem. Not a real report. Well, I'm just saying I'm at Conservation Ontario right now for their annual general meeting. So that's kind of why I'm not in chambers today.
Very good. Well, best of luck with that meeting and safe travels back. With that, we'll look for a mover and a seconder for that committee and council report. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Natchoff. Ms. Page?
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
and Mayor Graham.
Yes, that is approved. There is no general business. There is no correspondence for information. Under correspondence for action, we have two items. 12.1 is a 2023 council schedule update. This is merely housekeeping because the OAMC conference and date and location have both changed. So that's reflected in the updated map attached. Look for a mover and a seconder for that correspondence. Councillor Byrne and Councillor Natchoff. Ms. Page?
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
and Counselor Byrne.
Yes.
That is approved. Under 12.2, we have a letter from Miss Nancy Hanna with regards to a request for consideration for naming of the new fire hall. With regards to the fire hall, obviously it's still under construction, as you can see out here. So this is definitely something that we can refer to staff and we can consider at the completion of the construction in a future date. So my recommendation would be that we receive the letter and refer it to staff for future considerations. Looking for a mover for that. Councillor Natchoff, Councillor Edgerton. All in favor, Ms. Page?
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Absolutely.
and Counselor Edgerton.
Yes. Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Hanna, for that letter. It's very thoughtful and very kind, so we want to encourage that. Thank you. Moving on, we have the bylaws before us, much more conservative than they were previously. So the bylaw before us today is that bylaw number 2023-27, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement for the purpose of meeting and agenda automation between the eScribe Software Limited and the Township of Cappamonigan, be read a first, second, and third time and passed this third day of April 2023, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and a corporate seal attached thereto. Looking for a mover. Councillor Byrne and Councillor Natchoff. Ms. Page, if you could take the vote.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
and Counselor Natchoff.
Yes.
That is approved. There is no unfinished business. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. There is, okay, then we're on to the confirming bylaw, excuse me. Confirming bylaw is bylaw number 2023-28, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held April 3rd, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time and passed this third day of April, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto. Mover for the confirming bylaw, Councillor Natchoff, Councillor Byrne, all in favor. Ms. Page for the vote.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes.
That is approved. And last but not least, we're looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Edgerton, Ms. Page.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
and Mayor Graham.
Yes, that is approved. Upcoming meetings and events, the Cavan Monaghan Public Library Board meeting on Tuesday, April 18th, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Millbrook Branch. Millbrook Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting is Monday, April 24th at 4 p.m. in the council chambers. The Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting is on Tuesday, April 25th at 1 p.m. in the council chambers. The next regular council meeting is Monday, May 1st at 2023 at 1 p.m. in the council chambers. Our municipal roads tour is scheduled for Thursday, May 4th at 9 a.m., leaving from the township office. And the regular council meeting of Monday, May 15th is the second upcoming meeting at 1 p.m. here in the council chambers. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.